From the Heritage Foundation, I'm Tim Descher, and this is Heritage Explains.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So there it is. The UK has left the European Union. 47 years of history brought to an end in the name of sovereignty and independence.
Tonight, we are leaving the European Union. For many people, this is an astonishing moment of hope, a moment they thought would never come.
That's the Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson, on the night of January 31st, when the United Kingdom officially left the European Union. 3.5 years after millions of Brits voted to do so in 2016. It was a tremendous representation and celebration of sovereignty and self-determination, and many people throughout the UK agreed.
Very patriotic. It's a real great feeling.
Do things feel different to you today?
Well, how they portrayed it to us 2 years ago was that the whole island was going to sink if we came out. That's the only way I can look at it. You know, we were all gripping at 11 o'clock last night thinking, well, we're here, but hey-ho, you know, up and away, let's move on and let's get the job done.
We are now a free and independent country once again. It's wonderful.
And of course, we can't move on without final parting words to the European Union from Brexit Party leader and member of the European Parliament, Nigel Farage.
I want Brexit to start a debate across the rest of Europe. What do we want from Europe? If we want trade, friendship, cooperation, reciprocity, we don't need a European Commission. We don't need a European Court. We don't need these institutions and all of this power. And I can promise you, both in UKIP and indeed in the Brexit Party, we love Europe. We just hate the European Union. It's as simple as that.
There's been a lot of noise from each side about what will happen if the UK leaves the European Union. So now that they've left, where do they stand? If you looked at the UK now, it would seem like the only thing that's changed is formality. So what is on the horizon for the UK, the European Union, and the rest of the world now that there has been a Brexit? What does it mean for the special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom? What happens now that the UK has decided to allow Chinese telecom company Huawei to build their 5G network? Joining us this week is a friend of the show, Nile Gardiner. He's the director of the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom and the Bernard and Barbara Lomas Fellow here at the Heritage Foundation. This week, he explains. Well, Nile, thank you so much for joining us again on Heritage Explains.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
So this was a really big deal when Brexit finally happened. We've covered it. We've interviewed you now a couple times on it, and each time I've actually gone to you as a source of sanity with all this. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? So first off, thank you so much for your confident, resolute persona throughout this entire experience.
Well, thank you very much. I've always been confident about Brexit because, you know, Brexit is the single biggest democratic decision in modern British history. The British people voted for Brexit. I was confident that eventually the British people would get Brexit, and they have Brexit now. And you can never, underestimate the willpower of the British people. And the British people fought tooth and nail for Brexit, and they finally have it delivered. But that's because of the dedication, I think, of the Brexiteers who fought tooth and nail to deliver a democratic decision by 17.4 million Britons in June 2016 to get Britain out of the EU.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to track Brexit, you look no further than Nile's bio page on heritage.org. It has every single TV appearance he does, and he does a lot of them. And as we said, his analysis is spot on. So, and we'll link to that in the show notes so you can log into that. So, but let's get into this. On February 1st, when Prime Minister Boris Johnson woke up, they left. They were out of the EU. What was his first order of business?
Well, certainly Brexit was a very exciting moment. In fact, I was in London actually for Brexit, and I was there in Parliament Square as thousands of Brexiteers celebrated Brexit. And the following day, the Prime Minister immediately got down to work. And I think the top priority for the Prime Minister, day one, is to get a free trade deal with the European Union. So that's the number one priority for the British government. So the UK has entered into what is known as the transition period. That transition lasts until the end of 2020. During this time, the UK still remains part of the EU's single market and customs union. The UK still has to pay large sums of money to the European Union until the end of this year. This was actually a deal negotiated originally by Theresa May, the transition agreement. And so during the course of this transition, the British government is going to negotiate a trade deal with the EU. The end of this year, the UK is completely out of the single market and customs union, which means that Britain can fully control its own borders, can sign its own trade agreements, has full control of its own laws. So certainly December 31st, 2020 is going to be another very big day for the UK. So the Prime Minister's focus is very much upon getting that trade deal done with the EU and ensuring the British people get a good deal from it.
Yeah, and I know that through following this that the EU did not make the Brexit very easy on the British people. So can we imagine that they're not going to make this trade deal easy on the British people?
Yeah, you can be sure that the EU is going to make life as difficult as possible for the UK. There's a great deal of mean-spiritedness coming from the European Union.
Wow.
A lot of unpleasant messaging, all sorts of threats coming from the EU. And the reason why EU officials are making these threats is because they want to send a warning to any European member state of the EU that there are consequences for leaving the EU. And so they do want to make things as difficult as possible for the United Kingdom. And so you can expect some very difficult negotiations to take place over the coming year. The negotiations on the UK side are going to be headed by David Frost, who's an extremely experienced negotiator. He's been at the side of Boris Johnson for many years. He will, I'm sure, do a superb job. And I think at the end of the day, the Europeans have to decide whether they want to have a constructive way forward, whether they want to get a deal that works for both the UK and for Europe.
Yeah, so let me just stop you. So what would a no deal look like? I think they have until, you said, December. So in December of 2020, if there's no deal, is that potential devastation for the British and European economy?
Well, I would say at the moment there's certainly a serious possibility of a no-deal Brexit at the end of this year, simply because the European Union is being so difficult.
Okay.
But a no-deal Brexit, I don't think we should fear a no-deal Brexit. All that means is that the UK trades with Europe and the rest of the world under World Trade Organization rules.
Okay.
And so it's not the end of the world. In fact, a no-deal Brexit gives the UK a tremendous degree of flexibility. And Boris Johnson has made it clear that under no circumstances will he agree to an extension of the transition period. In fact, it's written into British law that there can be no extension to the transition. And so it's deal or no deal. So the EU has a choice here, whether they want to get a good deal that actually works well for European companies, workers, and governments, or whether they want to go down the no-deal scenario route, which is certainly going to hurt the Europeans a lot more than it would hurt the British.
Americans have almost entirely forgotten their history.
That's right, and if we want to keep our republic, this needs to change.
I'm Jarrett Stepman.
And I'm Fred Lucas.
We host The Right Side of History, a podcast dedicated to restoring informed patriotism and busting the negative narratives about America's past. Hollywood, the media, and academia have failed a generation.
We're here to set the record straight on the ideas and people who've made this country great.
Subscribe to The Right Side of History on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Stitcher today.
What other issues does Britain have the opportunity to use Brexit as a way of changing in Britain? I know that you've written on education. Is that something that has been impacted and will have an opportunity to make more conservative changes?
Well, Brexit is a big game changer, I think, because Brexit gives Britain a return to full sovereignty and self-determination. And as a member of the European Union, 2/3 of British law actually derives from Brussels.
Yeah.
British courts do not have sovereignty over British law. Britain's parliament is not fully sovereign. Britain's foreign policy is not fully sovereign. And so in every single area, the UK has been tied down and restricted and constrained by the European Union. So I see Brexit as a great liberating force for Great Britain. It's the biggest single event in British history since the end of World War II. And so there are opportunities for the UK to really advance the cause of freedom on every single front, whether it is talking about free trade, free markets, educational freedom. We've made some major recommendations to the British government for advancing freedom in the education sphere.
Yeah.
There's so much that can be done in the Brexit era. This is a whole new era for Britain, and I think every single area of government policy should be re-examined, reassessed in light of Brexit, and the British government needs to look at ways of truly liberating the British people from the shackles of big government and the state.
Is this a wait and see for other countries in the EU as to whether or not they would consider a similar Brexit? Are other countries considering leaving the EU, or are they kind of waiting to see what happens?
Yeah, I think that across Europe, many governments, European publics, are looking at how Brexit is going to work out. If Brexit is a great success, then I think that could open the floodgates for other European countries to follow. This is what the European Union elites really fear.
Right.
If Brexit's a great success, then you could see other European countries implementing their own version of Brexit, maybe over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. I don't think you're going to see any European countries leaving the EU in the immediate term in the next 5 years or so. But the next decade, 2 decades, yeah, you could see a lot of change in the EU, because there's no limit to the spread of freedom and sovereignty and self-determination. This is what Brexit's all about. It's taking back control of Britain's destiny and its future, its own laws, its borders, its trade. And that's a very compelling case, I think, that can be made across Europe. I'm in no doubt Brexit is going to be a great success, and I think that other European countries will eventually follow suit.
So leadership is everything, Niall. I mean, we know that Prime Minister Boris Johnson was the one to get it done, and you've praised him tremendously and his administration. You know that many people in his administration very well. Do you think that Prime Minister Johnson will continue to lead as a Thatcher conservative?
Well, I hope so. I mean, certainly Boris Johnson is a big admirer of Margaret Thatcher and Winston Churchill. There are different wings of the Conservative Party.
Okay.
There's a distinctly Thatcherite wing of the Conservative Party. There are others in the Conservative Party who are not Thatcherites. And so there will be a battle for the heart and soul of the Conservative Party, I think, over the next 2 or 3 years. I do hope that Boris Johnson goes down the same path that Margaret Thatcher took, the path of regeneration based upon free markets, individual liberty, based upon the idea that Britain's future lies upon the willingness of the British people to actually throw off the shackles of the state. And so I hope that Boris Johnson will refuse to embrace those within the Conservative Party who want to see an expansion of the state, those who wish to see the raising of taxes, for example. And I hope that he takes a Thatcher-Reagan-style approach, cutting taxes, reducing red tape and regulation, advancing a tremendous free trade agenda on the world stage, but above all, empowering the British people themselves to seek a brighter future based upon the principles of individual liberty and freedom. And that's what conservatism is all about, really.
Well, this has all been great for the U.S. and the U.K. to sort of take back a little bit more of sovereignty, as you've said. And then last week, as we covered on this episode, we saw the UK allowing Chinese telecommunications company Huawei to build out portions of their 5G network. And I know that you were spending time over there when this was announced and when it happened. And I'm wondering if you had any insight to lend as to what the UK was thinking and what that means for the special relationship.
Yeah, so the Huawei 5G issue is a very big issue for the UK. It's a big issue for the United States. It's a big issue for the special relationship. On January the 28th, the UK National Security Council took the decision to allow Huawei to play a lead role in building the UK's 5G network. Basically, Huawei will be given a 35% capped limit in terms of its involvement, but that's a huge role actually in the development of 5G.
Right.
And I was in London last week. I held a series of meetings with British officials, members of Parliament, and my message was always the same message, that the Huawei decision is a big mistake for the UK. It's very damaging, I think, for Britain's national security. It's damaging as well for the UK-US special relationship. And we've strongly urged the British government to rethink this decision, to reverse course, and to remove Huawei from the UK networks. And the reason why the British government went down this route is that Huawei has already spread itself very deeply into the UK's mobile technology networks. It played a key role in building the 2G, 3G, and 4G networks. Previous British governments made a huge mistake in allowing this. There was very little parliamentary scrutiny of what was going on. Boris Johnson had a big call to make, a big decision to make. He ultimately took the wrong decision on this. We've been urging Boris to really rethink this and do what is best actually for the security of the British people. Huawei is an extremely dangerous state-owned entity, basically operated by the Chinese government. It will be used as a huge spying operation in the UK. It cannot be trusted. Yeah. We've encouraged our closest friends and allies in the UK to take a step back, rethink this. There's still time for the Prime Minister to reverse course.
Do you think they are rethinking it?
I think that the British government has been taken aback by the sheer weight of American opposition.
Okay.
They underestimated the US response. They underestimated the parliamentary reaction. There are a lot of Conservative MPs who are very unhappy about this. There's a parliamentary rebellion brewing against it. Also, public opinion is strongly against it as well. And so this is a huge strategic error of judgment by the British government. There's still time to reverse it. And I hope the Prime Minister is going to listen to the mounting calls from this side of the Atlantic here in the United States, but also at home in the UK among Conservative MPs who are saying this is a really bad decision. Let's rethink it and reverse it.
Well, you've been a strong tower, a harbinger in this entire Brexit process. I imagine you've been very influential over there as you've been influential over here in the U.S., and so I imagine this will be another issue that you can have an impact on now. So thank you so much for doing that. Congratulations on Brexit, and we look forward to keeping in touch with you throughout this.
Well, many thanks. Thank you very much for having me on the show. Thank you.
And that's it for another episode of Heritage Explains. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. I've linked to all of Nile's work, as well as our previous episodes on Brexit in the show notes, so head on over there if you want to learn more. Remember, you can always email us at managingeditor@heritage.org, and please don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, or more importantly, please share our podcast with your friends and family. I'll be back next week to talk all things flu season.
Heritage Explains is produced by Michelle Cordero and Tim Desher, with editing by Thalia Rampersad.